So this is a follow-up to my previous video on my 2010 GMC Yukon with a 5.3. The sun's pretty bright this morning, so I don't know how well this is going to come through. But what I've done is I've removed the intake manifold and the lifter valley cover, and I've exposed the center part of the section of the engine where the camshaft and the lifter valley would normally be in a regular small block. So what they've done is they've filled this section in so that you can only see a small portion of the camshaft. There's a small hole in the front right here, and then another one towards the back. And then they have these oil towers. These oil towers right here is where the oil goes back through on the engine for when it goes into the V4 mode for the active fuel management. Each one of these goes down to the lifter that is turned off for each one of those cylinders. And if you remember, I told you that the number 7 lifter, or number 7 cylinder, and that lifter right there is the one that was loose. So what I've done is I've taken a screwdriver and I've modified the end of it. And I don't know how well this is going to come through. So what I did on this particular one is it's an old Phillips screwdriver, and I just beveled the end of it to make more of a wedge. And what I did was I dropped it down through the oil hole. I'll try and zoom in on this so that it touches the lifter, and as I turn it I can feel where it's grabbing onto the edge of the lifter, and it raises up and drops back down. And then what I did was I just took a hammer and I tap across the top of it until it breaks that lifter loose. Once the lifter is loose, then you can put everything back. Right now I have the rocker arm loose, so that once it popped up, it comes up all the way. And then what I'll do, I don't know if I need to or not, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the whole engine back together so that I can start it with that lifter or that rocker arm loose, so that the lifter will pump up fully, and then I'll slowly tighten that down so that it'll recenter. The rocker arms are not adjustable, they're torqued down, so you don't have the old small block Chevy where you torque it or tighten it down till the lifter stops clattering, and then you turn it a half turn more, and that would center it into the center of the lifter. But these ones don't work that way, and I don't know if it's required, but I don't want it to collapse on me again after I put it back together before the oil pressure pumps the lifter back up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put it all back together, and then I'm going to get back to that video. But as you can see, I have the intake manifold removed, I have the valve cover removed, and I have the center lifter valley cover removed. And this is the one that has all of the solenoids in it for the active fuel management. Each one of these little holes comes from one of the solenoids that goes to each one of those lifters per that cylinder. And each one of these things, what I'm going to do eventually is I'm going to replace this, and I'm going to remove all of these, and I'm going to completely bypass this system so that I don't have to worry about doing this again. Because in order to get to those crazy lifters, in their infinite wisdom, they decided that this valley needed to be filled in, and you're not able to get to the lifters unless you pull the cylinder head off. So I'm going to pause for now, and then I'm going to get back to it after I put the engine back together so that I can start it up, and you can kind of hear what it sounds like as I'm tightening down that rocker arm while it's running. That way you can hear the engine lug down as it puts pressure on the camshaft, and then you'll hear that it's quiet again, as opposed to what it sounded like the first time. And I'll get back to it in a minute.
One more thing I wanted to touch on.
Simply unplugging this plug that goes to the solenoids, it will cause the engine to go into permanent V4 mode, so it'll only run on 4 cylinders if you unplug this plug. So you may want to try and do that, but all that's going to do is just cause you more problems. The other thing I wanted to touch on is this is the oil pressure solenoid, and this piece right here is where that, underneath this is where that filter goes, inside this little section right here. That little screen filter goes underneath this, and when I clean that oil passage out, I remove this oil pressure sending unit so that I could push air down through this all the way down to the bottom of the block, and that's when I was able to get the oil pressure back up to where it was supposed to be. And remember, I talked about being able to remove that filter with a bolt. That's the bolt that I used, and all that is just a, it's very similar to the bolt that goes into the bottom of the oil pan and holds the oil pan on. And all I did was just screw that down into the top of that little oil screen and lift it up out of the valley, and then out of that hole, and I was able to clean the screen back out after I found trash in it for the second time. But that's all that was. It's nothing special. It's just a metric bolt. I don't remember what the size is. On this end is a 10 mil, and I'm looking at the size, and it's probably a 6 or an 8 mil bolt as far as the thread size, but that's all I used. A 5/16 bolt, I would imagine, would work as well, just to lift that screen out of there. And I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. Unplugging that solenoid right there that unplugs, or that wire connection is connected to the solenoids that are underneath this cover that covers up the lifter valley and goes to each one of those cylinders or solenoids that control each cylinder. And I just wanted to touch on that just a minute. Start recording. But you don't hear any more lift or tap. Trying to talk over the engine while I was adjusting the valve was I didn't want to try and talk over the top of the engine while it was. You still hear a little bit of a tick, but it's very, very minor. But on this side you don't hear any clatter at all. Now all I got to do is just get that AFM, active fuel management, get that system turned off, and that way it won't go back into V4 mode, and that should cure the collapsed lifter issue at least temporarily until I delete the entire system. Hope this helps. Thanks.